Have you ever wondered what it's like to have it all? To build an empire that stretches across continents, a civilization so advanced it shapes the world for 1,000 years. That was Rome. From a small city-state, it grew into the most powerful empire the world had ever seen. But with great power comes a great price. And for Rome, that price was its very soul. This is the story of how absolute power didn't just corrupt absolutely, it tore the Roman Empire apart from the inside out. Let's travel back to the early days, the Roman Republic. Power was shared. You had two consuls, a senate, and assemblies of the people. This system of checks and balances was designed to prevent any one person from becoming too powerful. For centuries, it worked. Rome conquered its neighbors, expanded its territory, and became a Mediterranean superpower. But with every victory came more wealth, more land, and more slaves. This newfound fortune didn't flow to everyone. It concentrated in the hands of a few elite families. These wealthy aristocrats bought up huge estates, pushing small farmers off their land. These displaced citizens flooded into the city of Rome. Jobless and desperate, they became a volatile urban mob. Dependent on the state for food and entertainment, the famous bread and circuses. Ambitious politicians saw their chance. They could win the support of this mob, not with sound policies, but with lavish games and free grain. The political game was no longer about serving the Republic, it was about personal ambition. Generals, returning from victorious campaigns, brought back not just treasure but something far more dangerous: loyal armies. Men like Marius and Sulla reformed the military, making soldiers loyal not to the state, but to their commander who paid them and promised them land. Suddenly, the most powerful men in Rome had private armies at their beck and call. This was a recipe for disaster. The result? Civil war. The streets of Rome ran red with blood as factions fought for control. The old republican system was breaking down. Into this chaos stepped a man of immense talent and ambition, Julius Caesar. He was a brilliant general, a charismatic politician, and a master of propaganda. He conquered Gaul, enriching himself and securing the undying loyalty of his legions. The Senate, fearing his power, ordered him to disband his army. Caesar's response? He crossed the Rubicon River, uttering the famous words, "The die is cast." It was a declaration of war against the Republic itself. After another brutal civil war, Caesar emerged as the undisputed master of Rome. He was made dictator for life, a title that sent shivers down the spine of traditional Romans. He centralized power, reformed the calendar, and settled his veterans on land. He brought stability, but at the cost of liberty. To many, he looked and acted like a king, the very thing the Romans had overthrown centuries before. A group of senators, calling themselves the Liberators, decided to act. On the Ides of March, 44 BC, they assassinated Caesar in the Senate House, hoping to restore the Republic. They failed. Caesar's death didn't bring back the old ways, it just unleashed another round of power struggles and civil wars. Out of the ashes rose Caesar's adopted son, Octavian. He was young, shrewd, and utterly ruthless. After defeating his rivals, including Mark Antony and Cleopatra, Octavian was left as the sole ruler. But he was smarter than his great-uncle. He knew Romans hated the title of king. So, he created a new system, one that kept the illusion of the Republic alive while concentrating all real power in his hands. He called himself Princeps, or First Citizen. We know him by the title the Senate gave him, Augustus. The Roman Empire was born. Under Augustus and his immediate successors, Rome enjoyed a period of unprecedented peace and prosperity known as the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. The empire was secure, trade flourished, and magnificent cities were built. But beneath this glittering surface, the corruption of power was festering. The emperors held the power of life and death over everyone. There were no real checks on their authority. While good emperors like Augustus or Trajan used this power to benefit the state, bad emperors could be catastrophic. Think of Caligula. He was a madman who allegedly tried to make his horse a consul. He wasted the state's treasury on lavish projects, indulged in every kind of depravity, and executed senators on a whim. Then there was Nero, who famously fiddled while Rome burned, or at least played his lyre. He persecuted Christians, murdered his own mother and wife, and saw himself as a great artist while his empire crumbled around him. The system that allowed such men to rule was fundamentally broken. Power was a poison, and the throne was a poison chalice. The Praetorian Guard, the emperor's elite bodyguards, quickly realized their king-making potential. They became the ultimate power brokers. If they didn't like an emperor, they could simply assassinate him and proclaim a new one who would promise them a hefty bonus. This led to a cycle of violence and instability. In a single year, the infamous Year of the Four Emperors, generals from across the empire marched on Rome to seize the throne, tearing the state apart in their quest for personal power. As the centuries wore on, the system became even more dysfunctional. The empire became a military autocracy. The emperor was whoever could command the loyalty of the most legions. The economy buckled under the strain of constant civil wars and the need to pay an ever larger army. Taxes became crushing. To make matters worse, emperors began devaluing the currency, minting coins with less and less silver to pay their bills. This led to runaway inflation, wiping out the savings of ordinary people and crippling trade. The corruption wasn't just at the top. It seeped down into every level of society. Provincial governors saw their posts as a chance to enrich themselves at the expense of the local population. Tax collectors were notoriously predatory. Getting anything done in the bureaucracy required bribes. Justice was for sale. The rich could get away with anything, while the poor had no recourse. The trust that holds a society together was eroding. People no longer felt like they were part of a grand Roman project. They just felt exploited by a corrupt and distant government. By the 3rd century AD, the empire was in a state of perpetual crisis. Barbarian invasions, plague, economic collapse, and endless civil war pushed it to the brink. Emperors like Diocletian tried to reform the system, dividing the empire and creating a more complex bureaucracy to manage it. But these were just bandages on a mortal wound. The core problem remained: the power was too concentrated, too absolute, and too easily abused. When the Western Roman Empire finally fell in 476 AD, it wasn't just because of barbarian hordes at the gates. It was because the empire had rotted from within. The relentless pursuit of power had corrupted its politics, shattered its economy, and destroyed the social contract between the rulers and the ruled. The story of Rome is a timeless and cautionary tale. It shows us that the greatest threat to a powerful nation often comes not from external enemies, but from the corrupting influence of power itself. It's a lesson that remains as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. Thank you for watching. If you found this journey through Roman history interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories about how the past shapes our present. See you in the next video.